Alright, it's time to show you the latest monstrosity I've created. This is a setup consisting of 44 game systems, which are all hooked up and ready to play at the touch of a few buttons. Everything is playable from the center of this room, where these two chairs are at. I also have it so that I can easily record the footage of anything I'm playing on TV, which I use for my game reviews. So far, it's allowed me to create 50 reviews, covering games from a broad range of systems. Today in part 1 of the tour, I'm going to discuss a few key points regarding this setup, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. The first thing I want to address is the TV situation. Some systems are hooked up to this 36-inch CRT from the 1990s, while others are hooked up to this brand new 42-inch LED TV. Why are they not all hooked up to the newer, technically advanced one? It's simple. The older systems look better on CRT TVs, because that's what they were originally designed to play on. Let me demonstrate. Here's Zelda 2 on the NES playing on both TVs, hooked up exactly the same way. The CRT shows the game's natural look. But the new TV has difficulty displaying the edges of objects. Everything has a wavy outline to it. Here's Adventure Island with the same result. And here's R-Type on the Turbografx 16. Same result. Another issue with modern TVs is that the old light gun games don't work on them. So retro classics like Time Crisis, Virtual Cop, Duck Hunt, and Point Blank cannot be enjoyed. Moving on, this setup is sitting in a room dedicated entirely to gaming. In the past, I did have a lot more games in here, but the collection outgrew the space, so most of the games have been boxed and moved to another room until I build more adequate shelving. Much like the game collection, the system collection started small and gradually grew over time. Early on, I had envisioned a setup that had everything hooked up at once, but getting to that point was challenging. The internet gave me some ideas, but many I had to think of on my own. It of course took some money to build. Some of these systems are cheap, others are not. I also had to purchase the shelving, extra wiring, and all the little gadgets that make this thing work. So in order to pay for it all, I had to tighten up spending in other areas of my life. I am married, and my wife supports this hobby. She plays games in this room sometimes, but she doesn't quite have the same taste as me. She prefers Peggle, and Peggle, and Peggle. Do you want to say hi?
Hi.
As I mentioned, every system is playable from the center of the room. The majority of controller cords have extensions on them that allow them to reach, and they can be tucked into these trays when they're not in use, keeping everything neat and orderly. A handful of older systems cannot have the controller extensions attached to them, such as the Atari 5200. For those, there is slack in the cords behind the systems, so they can be pulled out onto the floor, making the controllers reachable from the chairs. Of course, systems with wireless controllers don't require any of this stuff. As far as electricity, many people see the number of cords and instantly think it's dangerous, or that it would make the electrical bill skyrocket. However, every device in this setup has its own power switch. The only electrical current that's running through it is what is being consumed by the devices I'm using. Typically, this would be one system and one TV. So in other words, if you have a one system setup at your house, you are likely using the same amount of electricity as me. I do have some additional safeties in place. The wall outlets are GFCI outlets, and the power panels have fuses in them. As far as getting the signal from the systems to the TVs, that's done through a very complex network of cords and switch boxes. Here's a broad overview. There are 5 separate networks, one for each of the 5 different signal types: RF, composite, S-video, component, and HDMI. 4 of those 5 networks involve switch boxes, which I have to hit buttons on when I go to play something. The RF network, which is for the older systems, doesn't use switch boxes. Instead, I simply swap a cord out when I go to play. Switch boxes don't handle RF signals very well, which is why I stopped using them for that. So here's a quick run through of what I typically do when I want to play a game. I insert the game, turn on the corresponding power switch on the rack, hit the power switch on the system, hit 1 or 2 buttons on the switch boxes, Make sure the TV is on the right input, then stretch the controller cord out. As I mentioned, some systems involve a wire swap instead of a switch box. For the Virtual Boy and Vectrex, I simply hit the power switches on the rack and on the systems. And now for the final discussion of part 1. Why did I bother to create this setup at all? The simple and most obvious answer is, for entertainment. Many people watch movies, TV shows, or sporting events, but I prefer gaming over all those because I feel it's more enjoyable. Nostalgia is also a motivator, at least for the older systems. I have a lot of fond memories from when I owned some of these as a kid, and playing them today connects me to that past. There were also systems I didn't get to experience back then, and now I get a chance to see what they're all about. This setup is basically an interactive museum that covers 35 years of gaming history. The fact that everything is hooked up at once makes everything convenient to play. It also reduces wear and tear on the systems, since they're not being moved around that much. Some people wonder why someone would play old systems when there are new ones sitting a few feet away. The best way to explain it is that the older games have a different style to them, and many are actually more fun than the games they make today. It's similar to how some people feel about classic cars. They don't make them like they used to. Some people also wonder why I don't use emulators. My personal preference is to have the real thing. I want to hold a game in my hand, look at the artwork, read the manual, hold the old controller, and I want to be able to go to a used game store and browse the selections. It's a fun hobby, a fun setup, and I wouldn't have it any other way. In parts 2 and onward, I'll speak more in depth about how this thing is put together. For now, I encourage you to look around my channel and browse the other gaming related videos I've created. Thanks for watching.